Hello again, Chris Lee and Chase Robinson here to talk Florida Gators football. And we want to talk about what constitutes a good season. Florida at this point, 4-3, been an up and down season, started poorly with the loss to Miami, but the Gators are really playing good football and have pocketed some nice wins with some chances ahead. And boy, is that path ahead brutal. But I think you've got to be kind of pleased with Florida. If you can just kind of wipe out week one and reset. The A&M game wasn't great, but I really think Billy Napier's doing some things, and we're going to unpack the question in a minute of what is going to constitute a good season under the circumstance. But I really am impressed with what they've done, especially after losing Graham Mertz so far, Chase.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they're just getting better, and that's what you want to see from a team like this. You think back when you look at kind of the schedule, that's mentally has to be tough going into a season, knowing the teams you play. You in your first three games, you're 1-2. You lose to Miami, you lose to Texas A&M, and so I think the biggest question for me going into that Mississippi State game was, are these players going to play like they have a full season ahead and they want to win some games, or are they going to kind of cash it in and give up? And they didn't. They played hard, and they have
Yeah.
from that point forward. And I thought they played well against UCF, who we thought was a pretty good team at that point. They went to overtime with Tennessee. They beat Kentucky. Like, I feel like they've just gotten better, and that's what you want to see from a team like this. Is they get better, and so I think that that Billy Napier has them going in a better direction than maybe what we thought at the beginning of the season.
Chase, let's pull up the schedule because this is going to illustrate a point. And some of these games have been played, some of these are to come. But these are power ratings that I keep. It's a compilation of several sources that most people have heard of. But these are the top 14 teams in the country. And I think we might be missing no, we do have Texas A&M in there. Florida plays 7 of the top 14 teams in the country this year. Is either
Wow.
played or will play. These are how many points above average. So this is a good indicator for matchups because the lines end up close to what we've got on paper here. By the way, Florida is ranked 22nd nationally in its power rankings. So Florida's having a nice season by all accounts. I don't know what Florida did to get this schedule. R indicates a game that's on the road, N is neutral, H is home. And of course, a lot of these games coming up. But look, if you just want to know for comparison's sake, where do some of these other teams stand that are off the screen? Mississippi State is 68th. UCF, which Florida's already beaten, is 39th. Kentucky, which Florida's beaten, is 34th. And then Florida State down at 64th. I mean, pretty much every team in the country on their schedule is top half in the country other than the Sanford game. And most of these teams are playoff contenders. So I'm going to just throw this out there. If you finish 7-4 for your Florida or 7-5 regular season, I think it's been a good year. And if you get a win in a bowl game, I think it's been a really good year.
I would definitely agree with that. Now, to get to that point is going to be very tough. You look at
Yeah.
the Florida's on a bye week this week. They'll come back next week with their rivalry game against Georgia. They play that one down in Jacksonville, Florida. You see that with the N next to it. They're on our schedule, and then they will go to Austin, Texas, take on the Longhorns. Then they will come back home for a game with LSU, who's playing really good football right now. And then they will remain at home, and they'll have Ole Miss come to Gainesville, Florida. And then they will make their road trip to end the season at Florida State. So Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and then Florida State are the games that they have left. I can't think of 4 tougher SEC games than Georgia, Texas, LSU, and Ole Miss at this point of the season.
I mean, somehow they missed Alabama. There had to be an oversight
Right.
on the part of the schedulers because obviously they got it stuck to them. Somebody just missed putting Alabama on the schedule. I say that jokingly, but I mean, like the only break they got was Florida State not being nearly as good as we thought Florida State would be. But I mean, they've already pocketed a couple of top 40 wins. And I think, if you can pick off a Georgia and Ole Miss, you almost did it to Tennessee. You probably should have won that game in Knoxville, but you didn't. You took them to overtime. If you can pick off an LSU at home and Ole Miss at home, somebody like that, A&M at home, because at this point they pocketed 4. Florida State will be 5. If you can get 2 more wins, that means you will have beaten one of Georgia, Texas, LSU, or Ole Miss. I mean, at that point, to me, I know the number 7-5 number is not going to appeal to Florida fans, but I don't know how you can't be happy with that under the circumstances.
You're right, yeah. And you think back to Billy Napier's first 2 years; he was 6-7 in 2022. Last season, 5-7. So I think Florida will take a winning record. I really do. Now, again, it's going to be super tough to get there, but that's what you got to look towards. And again, they've been playing much better football.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, before we talk about maybe best chance for upsets, we remind you BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything sports betting. Every stat, matchup breakdown, even live odds and spreads to bet on during games, with the largest catalog of odds on everything from football, MLB, playoffs, NHL, NBA to political props. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in all the action at America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. Chase, looking at games the rest of the way, Florida gets a week off as we're doing this after the Kentucky win, which Florida winning that in stunning fashion in my mind, putting 48 on Kentucky, and I know there was a defensive score in there. Nobody's done that. But you've got DJ Lagway is a guy that is, I feel like, playing up to the hype. You've got an emerging rushing freshman who gives you a ground game threat there. You've got several receivers. I feel like this is a team that offensively can make enough big plays that it can pull off some wins. The defense is getting better. The Georgia game in a couple weeks is in Jacksonville. Georgia's not unbeatable. That's one that they could win. You look at that. At Texas may be tough. But LSU, that's in Gainesville. I know Florida's not played as well in Gainesville, but at some point that's due to snap. You've got Ole Miss. Who knows at that point if Ole Miss is out of the playoff chase? It is so portal dependent. Right. Florida could have a lot more to play for, and then at Florida State could just be, cashing it in at that point of the season. So I'm going to give them Florida State. So if we're picking 2 wins here, I think Ole Miss is one they can get, and maybe you can get LSU at home. And boy, if you do that, you've maybe upset some playoff hopes. Again, I think the 7-5 record is what people are going to look at. But under those circumstances, I think it'll have been a good year.
Yeah, I would agree with those 2 games. You got them at home. It's right after Texas, and yeah, I feel like if they on this stretch if they were to win 2 SEC games, I think it would be LSU and Ole Miss. And again, those are going to be very tough. But I feel like them being at home, I feel like Florida State can match up with them well in certain areas. So yeah, that's if there were 2 upsets to pick, that's who I would pick as well.
Yeah, I mean, you could look at the end of the season, and half of Florida's regular season schedule would have come against playoff teams, which is just crazy. Now, here's just out of the box, because it's 2024. Florida runs the table from here on out. Gators are in the play. What if Florida went 8-4? Would Florida be on the list of teams under consideration? Because I mean, at that point, you would have scored a couple of wins over some big boys. I'd call me crazy, but I think if you're 8-4 with this schedule, you've got to at least take a look at Florida as a playoff team.
Yeah, I think they would take a look at him. I think Florida could play spoiler for some of these teams who would be borderline of getting in the playoffs, and LSU or and Ole Miss, who may be in that situation. If they lose another one, they may be borderline. Well, Florida could ruin their chances. I think they have a better job of playing spoiler than they would getting in the playoff, though.
Yeah, I do too. But just throwing that out there because you never know. Well, if Florida makes the playoff, we'll be here to talk about it. We talk about football every Saturday night after games. Hit that subscribe button to get and enable notifications so you know. Caroline.Smith@southeastern14.com to advertise. For Chase Robinson, I'm Chris Lee. We are Southeastern 16, presented by BetOnline.